Rebuilding an automatic transmission is a slow and arduous process, or at least that's the way it's proving to be for me since I've never done it before. Today I'm going to take you through the process of rebuilding one of the clutch pack assemblies in this transmission. I'm going to go through my process, what I do, things I've learned along the way, what mistakes I've made.
I don't like it.
Today I'm going to take you through the process of rebuilding this center support assembly, which contains a 2.6 and low reverse clutch packs. So the first thing that I did was get these new frictions soaking. So these just have these little snap rings, just pop right out. I'm going to check for marks, but this one, I don't think we have another one that matches. Backing plate on top, and we've got our old pack right here. This is our wave plate on the bottom. The wave plate we reuse. And then we've got 5 steels and 5 frictions. These ones are pretty black. And then we've got another little snap ring in here. And this holds in the Belleville washer. And I'm gonna keep these snap rings separate. Although this one's pretty obvious because it is tapered. It's comes to a triangle point. You can see that. And then Belleville washer, which we will reuse. And then this is a molded piston, which we will replace. So that I'm going to set over with this because all that's getting replaced. And that's it on this side. So that one was really easy. And this side, I think, is a little bit more complicated. A snap ring over here, and I do want to keep this snap ring separate from the other one because I think it's going to be pretty similar in size, and I want to make sure we don't mess up our thicknesses. Probably can just dump this out now that I took that snap ring. Friction, steel, friction, steel, friction. Looks like 5 of them, right? This outer snap ring is for actually taking this low sprag apart. See, this low sprag, this is like a clutch that keeps from reversing. It won't turn clockwise, but it turns free counterclockwise. So that snap ring there is to take that apart, which we will do in order to clean it, but just not right now. And this snap ring, I believe this is a snap ring you're supposed to replace, if I remember correctly. There's a few snap rings that you're supposed to replace, and the kit comes with the ones that are supposed to be replaced. And I can see you're gonna bend this snap ring up, getting it out. I noticed that with the other one too, that it was bent by the time I got it out, and that's probably why they say replace them, because they're hard to get out without bending. There we go. And you can see it kind of got bent up doing that, so you can see that's why that's one's replaced. And that should bring this whole low sprag assembly out of here, supposedly. There it goes. All right, so that brings us that Belleville washer there. This is the low sprag, which I'm still gonna try to take that snap ring and see if I can get in there and clean it out. And then the other molded piston. We may have to pop it out with air. I've done that before on some of these. And there's also a fat O-ring. So here's that fat O-ring, which we will replace. Let's see if we can just pop this off with compressed air. There it goes. So then this is the other molded piston, which again will be replaced. Got to evaluate these bushings too. That's the last thing. Yeah, that bushing definitely has a little bit of cracking on it. Let's see about just replacing both of these. I've got the bushings, may as well replace them. I do have a bushing driver that will fit. I should be able to use that from the other side to push the other one out. I have these blind hole pullers, which this attaches to a slide puller. It's kind of hard to clamp something like this. This is light aluminum. You don't want to clamp on it too hard and be able to utilize a slide puller. But this thing will fit in here. I can tighten it up, and then I can put it in the press and press down on it. And I think what I'm going to do, there's two of them, one on either side. This one is flush. So this one on the inside, on the 2/6 side, is flush. Now this side is recessed. We need to reset it back to the same. This one is a little bit different than the other ones that I've set. This one seems to be between 110 and 125 thousandths. That's this guy right here. We'll call it 115. And this one is flush. So I'm going to try to start with this one because it's flush, so it should be easier. And this just barely fits in there, which means it'll be a nice tight fit. Then we can come over to the press. And then I take a look underneath. Yeah, let's press it out. There we go. Then we should be able to just slide this guy down and just set it right in that other one and press that one out. Notice I'm using wood blocks. That's because I'm not trying to do any heavy pressing with this scenario. This is aluminum housings. That's kind of my gig. This is a 20-ton press. We're not trying to bend anything up. We're just trying to push these bushings out. And I can feel it starting to go now. Yep. There we go. So I'm gonna head over to the parts washer, get this assembly cleaned up and the parts that are gonna get reused, which isn't that many on this set, and then track down the other couple of parts that we need to put back in that are getting replaced, and then I'll meet you back here and we'll get it put back together. All right, so we've got everything cleaned up. Time to go back together. The first step is gonna be new bushings. Let's start with a mallet. I completely clean the assembly, put the bushings back in, and then I go clean it one more time because you will end up with some, like if you're using a rubber mallet, you'll get some rubber dust. So there's always some particles that get in here. There, it's starting to go. That's looking good. There we go. Right where we're supposed to be. And this other bushing just goes in flush. There we go. First thing is a new piston. Matches up with the old one. Lube it up with assembly goo. This transmission has two different types of pistons. Some of them are like this, where it's one-piece molded rubber and metal all in one unit. And for those, you replace the whole piston because the seal, you want to replace all the seals when you rebuild. So anything that has a seal built into it, the whole piece has to be replaced. And then there's also some pistons that are two pieces, a machined metal piston with rubber lip seals that fit into a groove on it. And those, you don't replace the whole piston, or you don't need to unless there's damage to the piston. You just replace the seals. This piston will then press down into this groove. There we go. It says Belleville washer. those with the tabs facing down. I almost messed myself up on that because I took this apart 4 months ago when I initially tore it down and inspected and then put everything back together. I put it in upside down just so I could easily put the parts together, because then there's no spring tension, and set them aside so I didn't lose track of what parts went with what. But then when I took it apart today, it was backwards, and I didn't remember that I had done that without going back and looking at that footage. I've got the piston pushed all the way down. You can get a tool to compress this. I'm going to see if I can work it in by hand. It's at an angle. I think I can probably just compress it around the loop and get the snap ring down as close as I can. And if that doesn't work, then I think we can take and make some sort of a jig to push it in the press. There we go. One tab's in, and I think we can kind of just work it around. Just kind of press on it and work away on the round. And I just took a soft punch and a light tap. Also helped to kind of seat it in there. Is enough to spring it. Because as it relieves the spring pressure, then the spring of the snap ring pushes out. Bevel tabs facing down. Use the compression tool that we bought, obviously, and just used to install the snap ring. Done. Now, here are our other parts. Install our wave plate. 2/6 wave plate. Steel. Clutch plates beginning with steel and alternating friction until you have 5 of each. And then we get a backing plate. And these snap rings are non-selective on this particular clutch pack. But we've got about 90 thousandths. Says you should have about 50 thousandths. If you have not, you've misbuilt the clutch pack and you must rebuild it. Double check that these steels are 90 thousandths, the same thickness as these steels, which are 90 thousandths. So I don't think that's an issue at all. All right, so now turn this over. Now we put our fat O-ring, which I'm going to put some grease on, both to aid in the installation and to keep it lubricated as things are getting going. So slide down. I'm just going to work it with a screwdriver. This is a blunt screwdriver. I don't want to cut the O-ring on those splines, see, so I'm just trying to work it, stretch it over the splines. So now we're over the splines, and we should be able to just slip down. Don't really want to roll it, we want to just try and walk it down. And then I take and stretch it, spin it. Make sure it's not rolled over anywhere. Next up is the molded rubber piston. It's really the inside and the outside is what you're lubing. The bottom doesn't necessarily need the grease on it. Alright, that snaps in there. Now we need to put back together the low sprag assembly. I forgot to turn the camera on when I was taking it apart, but I did take it apart and clean it, and it goes back together really easy, so I'll show you that. It's pretty simple. It's just there's these two wear rings, one on top and one on bottom of this sprag assembly. The book does not talk about taking this apart other than that some versions are serviceable and some aren't. I wanted to take it apart so I could clean it, and it was definitely very dirty and worthwhile to clean. There we go. So if we're locked on here, we can freewheel counterclockwise, but we're locked going clockwise, and that's the correct orientation. And then a snap ring that holds it all together. We need our Belleville washer, which sits right inside like that. Our low sprag assembly. There's a blind spline right there. It lines up with the blind spline right there. This is going to require the press. And this does require a new snap ring, which was in the kit. It doesn't appear to be snapped all the way in, but maybe it is. There's just some play. It's like the snap ring is not very tight. It just doesn't seem like it's really holding it. I would expect that snap ring to be in tighter.
I don't like it.
I actually don't like a couple things about this. Something's not right. First something is that this was a flat plate that is now not a flat plate. So I think the book is either very misleading or there's different versions of this and the book doesn't account for it. The book says to press on the outer race, and it even shows a picture of that. The problem is all that's holding the outer race to the inner race is this thin plate, which used to be flat. We could make it flat again, but pressing on the outside of this, the part that's actually pushing on the spring is the bottom right here. So in pressing on the outside of this, it's pushing up like this, which just domed out this plate because this plate is all that's holding. The snap ring that actually holds the tension holds on this, what they call the inner race, which is also the inner race is what pushes down on the Belleville washer. I need to figure out how to press just on this inner part because this is what's pressing against the Belleville washer and this is where the spring's going to go. Oh, it slides nice and freely. It's impossible for you to see in here, but we'll show you on the bench. So what I ended up doing was pressing here, and then I was able to get that snap ring worked in there. You can now pull up on this. Get our plate in here. Pop this snap ring back into place. And there we have it. And we're also supposed to verify we've got counterclockwise and lock clockwise, and that is correct. So all that's left to do to finish this up is to put in our last components here of the clutch pack part of it. If I can get it lined up, we have a little bit. There we go. Go steel friction, right? Beginning with steel and alternating friction. Steel, friction, and these should engage in that sprag. There we go. Here's 4. And 5. And again, we have an extra steel and an extra friction that I didn't soak. And then we've got a backing plate. And again, there's no selective on this one. Is there a blind groove on this one? Doesn't appear so. We should have 50 thousandths on this one also, they say. Let's sit up here. That one's more like 60, which I would say is pretty close to 50. So this assembly is now complete. When I first set out on this, I was thinking I'd make 2 videos. One of taking it apart and diagnosing it, and the second of rebuilding it and putting it back together. I've come to realize that in order to make one video of the whole rebuild process, it would either have to be very long, probably 3 hours long, and go into every detail and show you everything, or it would have to be super high level in order for me to touch on everything and get it into one video that was actually watchable. So what I decided to do is to make 2 separate videos. One, going through the complete rebuild of one individual clutch pack assembly. And then make a second video that covers the high level of the full rebuild, because a lot of it's repetitive. Rebuilding one clutch pack, once you've done one, the others are very similar. There's a few subtle differences, but for the most part, the process is pretty similar. Is anybody bothered by the fact that that 2.6 clutch pack had almost 90 thousandths of clearance when it's only supposed to have 50? And the book says there's nothing you can do about it? Maybe you already left a comment telling me I'm stupid for putting it back together that way. Well, that's how I feel. I've already got the whole thing put back together, but I'm gonna take it back apart and see what we can do about that. It seemed like it took me forever to put that thing together, but it only took me 5 minutes to get back to this part. So for all the other clutch packs in this transmission, the book gives a range for the clutch clearance, which is usually about 15 or 20 thousandths range. And then if it's not within that range, they make the snap ring that holds the pack in place is what they call a selective snap ring. So they make different thicknesses, and based on how far off you are, which direction you need to change, you can order a thicker or a thinner one, change out that snap ring, and that's how you take up that gap or make a bigger gap to get the right clutch clearance. But for this one, and only this one, the book says you should have about 50 thousandths of clutch clearance, and if you don't, you've misbuilt the clutch pack and you must redo it. Personally, that doesn't make any sense to me because the reason why there's a range of what the clearance should be and why there's a way to adjust it is because there's a lot of individual pieces stacked together. And if we're talking about 50 thousandths of clearance, we've got 5 frictions and 5 steels, plus a wave plate, plus a backing plate. So that's 12 pieces that if they're off by less than 5 thousandths on each piece, you could have almost no clearance or all the way up to 100 thousandths of clearance. And so to say that on this one clutch there's no way to adjust it, and if it's not where it should be, you've done it wrong, just doesn't make sense to me. But I'm going to take it apart and put it back together, and we'll see if that changes it. I'm going to double check that our Belleville washer is seated all the way around our snap ring that holds that in. It sure looks like it is. We checked on that before, but just double checking to make sure that nothing weird is going on there. Now that's a fixed point, right? I can't change the depth of where this snap ring sits that holds in this Belleville washer. To me, there's no reason for me to take it back further than this. So we'll go back and make sure we're all in the right order, and I'll get our dial indicator set back up, and we'll check it again. And we're still at 90 thousandths, maybe 91 thousandths now. I did do some reading and see that some other people have used the selective snap rings for the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3, 5 reverse clutch packs, which is the other one that's very similar in size to this one with success. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start by, I'm going to take the snap ring back out. Keep that here. Let's set this pack to the side. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3, 5 reverse. And I'm just going to pop this snap ring out of this top one. So these are the snap rings for the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3, 5 reverse. We can actually see that this one from the 2, 6 reverse that we're looking to replace with a thicker one is just slightly smaller in diameter. Not much, but just slightly smaller than the one out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, which there are, I believe, 5 or 6 different thicknesses you can order for that. So I don't see any problem with using this. A little bit bigger in diameter is actually better. I mean, I don't think we're going to run into a problem with getting it sprung together tight enough. If it was a little bit smaller, that might be a concern that it would pop out, but a little bit bigger to me is not a concern. It will. So that thickness will work. Let's just try it. So that gets us down to 65 thousandths. So this particular snap ring looks like 115 thousandths. And so it should have a purple mark on it according to the book. Let me see if I do see that. So right there, there's a little purple mark. It's very hard to see. I don't know if you can see it there. Also have a light blue and an orange that are thicker. So if we went with the light blue, that would be approximately another 10 thousandths thicker, which would get us to about 55 thousandths of clearance. So I'm gonna see if I can order one of those light blue snap rings for the 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll put it in this. So we got our new snap ring here. Let's see if we can get this thing in there, and hopefully we're where we need to be now. Well, that makes me feel a lot better. 52 thousandths, 2 thousandths is definitely within tolerance. So I think that concludes the rebuild of this clutch pack finally. In our next video, I'm gonna go through at a much higher level the rebuild of all the rotating assemblies in the transmission. And I will touch on the few differences that the other clutch packs have that I didn't cover. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you back here on our next one. So I'm gonna take you through the process of one, how I do it, what I've learned, what mistakes I've made, and we'll see what are we gonna see?